Hey guys, what is up? Man, I'm excited to talk to you about Daredevil Born Again, episode 4, titled Six Semper Systema. And when I looked that up, translated it, it basically says so always system. So I guess the way you would really say it is so always the system. And it was a pretty good, title because basically everything involved, if it's dealing with Daredevil or dealing with the Kingpin, is dealing with how they're having to navigate the system to get the things that they want to get, either for better or for worse, and how they have to navigate through that. Now, I have to admit, this episode to me is not the best. I actually think it's probably the worst of the season, but ironically, I think it actually has the best moment out of the whole entire series. If there was a clip that I would want to rewatch over and over and over again, the clip between Matt Murdock and Frank Castle having their conversation at the end of the episode is probably one of the best things that Daredevil has given us yet. Now, the White Tiger amulet, let's just get into the very beginning of the show, where the White Tiger amulet is put in the bag, which seems to be given to Daredevil, which then I guess is going to go to his family. That was pretty cool to see, I guess. It did feel like there was missing context, though, and that's going to be a running thing for me when it comes to this whole entire episode, is that to me, a lot of it feels like it's missing context. It's missing layers that I feel like the original Daredevil show would not have given up on. The original Daredevil show, if you were going to put a moment in there, the moment was super important. And I feel like there's a lot of moments in here that they didn't build up to the way the original Daredevil show would. And I do believe this is brand new writing. I don't believe this is a part of the old show, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is still a part of that old show, which does make the show itself feel very disoriented when you realize that there was a different tone in the original way they wrote things, and now they're blending that into the new way of doing things. It honestly does kind of feel a little disoriented. And if, like I said, I feel like you're missing story beats. And the perfect example of that is White Tiger's niece, who we know eventually would become White Tiger herself, Ava Ayala. She's giving her monologue to Matt, kind of like a cab kind of statement, basically feeling very low down on how society is treated her and her family and her uncle, and feeling like no justice is going to be served. And, having someone like Daredevil, trying to motivate her, but really he's just speaking to himself. And I do wish there could have been a little bit more time with her, or just not had her there at all. To me, this scene would have worked a lot better if it would have been the White Tiger's wife instead of his niece. But I know for comic fans, they did that specifically for them. So we see that and go, oh yeah, she'll be White Tiger next. But for emotions, I feel like the mother, the wife, would have been better suited in this role at this particular time for this moment, because that's the only character we've already had any conversations with beforehand, specifically with Matt Murdock. I personally think that heroes have wisdom. I think heroes should have wisdom. And I think that these showrunners shouldn't be afraid to let heroes share their wisdom unto others. That's what makes them heroic, partly. I do think there's times for heroes to learn things, but I feel like as a society, we're constantly trying to tell our heroes who they need to be. But I would really prefer for us to show people why our heroes are so great to begin with. And I think this would have been a cool moment. If you're going to have the niece, you're going to have her have the emotional moment with Matt, I think it would have been cool. Even if he was saying what he said to her for himself, I do think it would have been cool if he gave a little bit more wisdom on the idea of trusting the system, and something that he believes in. I think his beliefs should be strong enough to be able to throw something out at her to make her think a little differently about society, to challenge her thoughts, and to give her some sort of comfort. And, that's not my job. That's the writer's job. And I wish that would have been in there, because I think it would have been something to show how much of a hero Matt Murdock is, being there for the people who need them, even if it's just for a moment to share their emotions and to be there. I feel like he somewhat was that, but I do feel like some of that was missing. Now, talking about things being disjointed, the thing that felt the most disjointed to me was definitely the Muse character. And, you're setting him up as a villain, but then you're not actually really following through, allowing him to show how bad of a villain he really is. And the scene definitely felt disjointed, and we realize it is because basically they just threw this part in there so everyone would go point and go, oh, look, Muse! But then you don't really see what he does with the person he's carrying until the end of the episode, which really seems like that's what it should have been in the first place. So, I don't know. That scene I felt like was kind of weak, and it could have been a lot better, but I think we'll wait until we get more down into the video before we really get into my thoughts on how it could have been better. Now, I have to admit something. There are scenes I do not care about. I do not care about the club scene. I personally am kind of over the Vanessa and Kingpin therapy. I'm ready for them to be fully in love again, to be a cohesive unit. I do not care. I do not care about some of these other side characters. The BB character, especially this episode, it's not gravitating to me on her as a character. A lot of the other characters I thought I was going to have hope and trust in. I'm not trusting them as characters to replace someone like a Karen or Foggy, which I don't really think you can truly replace a Karen or Foggy. It just doesn't personally work for me. If it doesn't deal directly with Kingpin, or if it doesn't deal directly with Daredevil, it's not something that's really needed for me. And honestly, I think you could have cut out everything going on with the club and that whole little bit, and you could have still had all the other moments happen, and it could have made it work. I just personally just thought it was kind of a waste of time. And, personally, I thought it was just kind of a little, it wasn't needed. And I think you could have gave that time for Muse, maybe trying to capture his victim and who his victim was. I think that could have been more interesting than what this was here. An idea I had, speaking about the Kingpin and Vanessa situation, about how she says he was gone. Now, I understand because of the MCU context, I understand he was shot in the head. He had other situations going on. But I do personally wish that they could have done something else with that, just explain how long he really has been gone. I think this would have been a good time to bring up the blip, just to show how it affected other people in society. I actually think it would have been really interesting to see that Kingpin was the one who got blipped during that time and that he was gone for those years. I think that would help explain a lot of things, including the fact that Vanessa was moved on with someone else. I just think that could have added a cool layer that would have been really interesting. Now, during their talk, they talk about Adam and what happened to Adam, and we all wonder if Adam died. And as we see later, maybe that's not the case, but it could in some ways be worse. But like I said before, I'm just ready for them to fall in love again. The therapy scenes, I feel like it's just there to fill up the time for Matt Murdock's romantic interests to still be involved in the show in some kind of way without having to deal or be a part of with Matt. And it was just an excuse to show why Vanessa maybe wasn't in some of the other scenes previously. And if you know that context, about, how they were filming the show with another actress. This series was filmed with another Vanessa in mind. They fired her and got the original Vanessa to be in the roles. And that's really the only reason we're getting these therapy scenes. And I just really don't care for them. I'm ready for them to be in love again. I'm ready for them to be a cohesive unit. And I'm just done with it. Personally, I am done with it. Another thing I didn't really care for was the defendant that Matt Murdock was defending. It was interesting to see how, Matt Murdock is, inside the courts and how he interacts with his day-to-day as just a basic defense lawyer. But it just seemed kind of, I don't know. I didn't really care for it. And I didn't even care for the love interest. To me, to make me care about this, I feel like this should have been the whole show. And that would have been dumb. That would have been a dumb idea. And so it was clearly there to show how the system corrupts itself and how the system has layers of problems that needs to work through. But even with that, I have to admit, if you know like real world stuff, right? If you know what's going on, like specifically in New York with the DA Alvin Bragg, and you can even look up like a New York Times story in 2002 where he, they particularly talk about how it was an initiative for New York to not put people like this in prison, prison time or jail, and that basically it had to be a very serious economic crime or sexual assault or murder for them to actually be put in prison. So just knowing the reality of what New York has been like for the past few years, just from reading articles and news stories, this whole monologue thing just didn't really work for me personally. It just didn't ring true to me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And trying to make me feel empathy for him, this guy who could get a job, could work. I had some empathy, but I have to admit, it didn't captivate me as a viewer. I just wasn't captivated by it. The new love, the other love interest, the one that's helping out in the court, maybe she'll come into the picture. Maybe she was just there because they were like, hey, we need to show this attractive lady flirting with Matt Murdock. I don't know. But again, another thing that I just didn't feel like was really needed when it came into this story personally for me. But like I said, it was cool to see him working as a lawyer, which I count as a plus. But I do have to ask the question, what does the show want to be? Like, are we trying to be at the classic level of what Daredevil used to be? Are we trying to be something even similar to what Penguin is? Like this grand storytelling, really exciting stuff? Or is this like, and I don't even mean this in a negative way, but is this like a CW show? Because it does feel, especially this episode, probably feels the most disoriented. And it reminds me of moments that you would see in Arrow. That's what it reminds me of, in like the best parts of Arrow. So I'm not even saying this is necessarily as a bad thing, but to me it is like, feels confused on what it wants to be. And that's like one of the biggest takeaways, besides Punisher, which I'm really excited to get into. Is the biggest takeaway I'm getting from this episode as a whole. The Matt and the police confrontation, it kind of shows that maybe that police officer specifically wasn't the one that killed White Tiger, which does lead to the question, who killed White Tiger? I think it's definitely going to be a police officer unit, but time will tell what that'll actually be and how that will play out. Another thing that kind of got on my nerves, besides this episode being very inconsistent to me, and then some of the moments not feeling like they were worth it or made sense, I'm not a big fan of how Kingpin is talked to, and I don't like how the writers have written as Kingpin as dumb. Kingpin is very intelligent. Kingpin is very smart. He has an anger problem. We all know that Kingpin has an anger problem. But everything else, he is very smart. He is very smart. And to treat him dumb, to treat him like he doesn't understand how the law works or how the system works itself, I just didn't really care for that. I didn't fall for that. And it does make me wonder. It gets to the point where we have to stop blaming what was in the past and start recognizing, okay, maybe those things were in the past, but why did you keep that? Because I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of how Sheila Rivera, her character, is kind of like the chess piece to show that Kingpin is not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not a fan of that. I don't really like that. I don't like how she was speaking to him in multiple times in this episode. It just seemed off. And you can tell that she is the chess piece to set up the narrative that they're going to set up later to show how Kingpin is, capturing people and making them a part of this cult, and how she's going to be the one to see that and be the one that's not going to be the person that falls into the cult and backs away before it's too late. That's just what it seems like to me, but doing that, you don't have to use Kingpin as a jobber to show that, okay? Kingpin doesn't have to look dumb to make Sheila Rivera look smart. that just kind of bothered me. I wasn't really a big fan of that. You know, the Kingpin mayor duties was funny, you know, in elements of it to kind of show, you know, what it's like to be a mayor. And some of it is stuff that's really boring and stuff you don't want to deal with. And, you know, that was kind of cool. But to see the setup where BB Ulrich's story comes out because of what Daniel Blake kind of shared with her at the club, you know, like I said, that club scene didn't even need to happen because I think this part right here would have kind of explained everything. They've already given context the episode before that they were friends. I don't even think that there was anything really to be shared with that. Because honestly, I think it could have been even a bigger surprise, for example, when it's revealed that he really he really was the one who shared those secrets. But, you know, it does give a moment to show how Kingpin is learning how to deal with things peacefully. And when I say peacefully, meaning no one died, right? No one died. He still yelled and freaked out, but no one got their head caved in by a car. So clearly, Kingpin is progressing to a better version of himself, and we all do appreciate it. And, of course, that's what opens the door to sprout this new follower, someone who really does believe in Kingpin, and now Kingpin knows that he could ask this guy probably to do anything, and this guy's going to do it. And, of course, it's just really made for all of us to see Rivera, you know, Sheila Rivera's character, look and go, oh, this is not good. This is not good. And that's when it comes to all of this, the moments where she was seen as smarter than Kingpin is, which it is her job to know all those things and how those things work, to remind the mayor. But still, it just seemed like they were setting her up to be like, look how dumb he is, look how smart she is, trust her, you know? And to me, that was just weak storytelling. Now, we've talked enough about the negatives. Let's get into the best part of the show. The best part of the show was Daredevil and Punisher. It's the best part of the show. When Matt Murdock finds Frank Castle and they have their conversation. And what I love about it is that it really challenges Matt because Punisher does know loss. And I have to admit, it felt like the realest, out of all the monologues, about everything that was said throughout this whole show, this felt like the realest thing out of the whole show. Now, it could just be because how incredible Jonathan Bernthal is as an actor, which I'm sure is a lot of it, but I do think there was more truth resonated in this moment than any of the other moments in the show. This monologue right here was the bee's knees, and I loved every second of it. If there was something I was going to go back and watch this show again, this clip would be the clip that I would watch over again. As I was making my notes, kind of rewatching the show, I would skip through moments, right? I would get to certain beats, but I watched the whole conversation that Daredevil has with the Punisher in this moment because it was just so good. I wasn't going to skip past it. I wanted to see every single bit of it, and that just shows how good of a quality this scene was and how impactful it was, not just for the characters, for us as the audience. I want more of this from Punisher, and I'm really hoping that we're going to start getting this more sooner than later. Now, if you don't know, Jonathan Bernthal originally rejected to come back to the show, and he said that basically he didn't feel like it would resonate with the fans the way they were writing him, and he didn't care for the way they were writing his character. And a lot of people are going to send their guesses about knowing why this or why that, but I think if we're being honest, I'm pretty positive I know why, and it's probably because they were really probably writing, you know, the same way they're writing Kingpin in some ways, they were probably writing Punisher almost as a joke, and probably belittling him, and probably doing a lot of things, you know, to show how evil Punisher is. Because that's how most of Hollywood views that character, is evil. That's how most of the comic book writers nowadays view that character. I mean, they're doing everything they can to destroy the Punisher character. If you even read what happened with them very last with the Punisher, you know, Jason Aaron, the comic book writer, went out of his way to bury the Punisher. Most of these people, and this is a kind of a rant, but even with outside of the Punisher character, It's so funny to me that a lot of these Hollywood people and a lot of these other comic book writers hate the Punisher character so much because he goes after criminals and pedophiles and all these different things. But then they don't get mad at him, or they don't care when a character acts just like him in other contexts. You know, if you read the Ultimates comics, those characters are brutally murdering people all the time. Like, all the time. And no one cares about that. But if Punisher does it, it's all of a sudden this evil bad thing. It's just something I think is kind of interesting, how they treat the character. And it doesn't really surprise me that maybe Jonathan Bernthal was like, you know what, I don't know if I really want to come back. But again, as we heard, it caused them to make changes to the show, which I'm really glad they did, because missing Jonathan Bernthal as Punisher in this series would have been a really, really disappointing. And I want to see more Punisher in a way that's respecting him as well as a character. So, you know, we know that basically after that moment, Daredevil and Kingpin are going to start sprouting out again about who they really are. We're going to start seeing Daredevil being Daredevil again. And we're going to start seeing Kingpin doing what he needs to do to thrive and survive as mayor, and really showing where his true abilities are, is the cruel mobster that we know him to be. We finally see what happened to Adam. Adam's basically stuck in a prison. And when Kingpin really wants to let ease come from him, he goes and eats a nice dinner while he sees this man that Vanessa had an affair with behind some bars, probably never to see life ever again. And when we get to the end, we see that Muse is carrying this victim into his lair where he makes his art. And he's using this victim's blood to make the formula that makes his paint so he can make more art. And this is the part to me that I think was probably more important than a lot of the other moments they showed. Now, clearly, Daredevil and Punisher having their conversation probably was the most important part of the show, of the episode. But I think, you know, we could have took out the club scene. And, for example, could have took that time to show me how Muse captured his victim. If you would have shown the victim getting captured by Muse, I think that would have been more interesting. That would have grabbed the viewer a lot more. And I think that was more important, because clearly Daredevil is going to be going after this guy sooner than later. And so that's just kind of how I felt about that. To me, this episode was an episode of missing story beats. And I felt like it missed a lot. And thankfully gave us one big thing, but then gave us a lot of small things that I feel like were kind of wasted. But that's just me, guys. What did you think about the episode? Go down in the comments, let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear what you have to say. And guys, whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, I hope you're having a good one. Peace.